Great.
Sites Division.
Sites Division. And he's going to be talking about post-rock work on the building that's been done in this area. We're starting a project at the Art Center to document and try to collect as much information as we can about the stone work that was done in this area. So he's going to kind of get us started about what we should be looking for. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Just get yourselves comfortable here.
Wherever you can see.
I should state, Doris, that what I've done is I have a representative sampling of buildings and objects for the entire region. So I haven't focused entirely just upon, say, Russell County, but I wanted to give an overview of that. I'm a historian by profession. I have a great amount of respect that borders on reverence for our ancestors, for our past. To me, it is very significant to study the people that settled this country in the 1870s and the 1880s. They went through hard times, droughts, blizzards, grasshopper invasions, everything else. The 70s and the 80s wasn't an easy time. There was depressions also during that time frame. And when I speak about ancestors and people that came before us, I do have a great amount of respect for them. And of course, what they have left in the way of built environment, what we find in the landscape, I think is really truly significant. We have an obligation not only to retain it, but to perpetuate it. I guess that's the main thing I would like to leave with you. And I'll be talking a little bit more about the significance of it, what it meant in terms of the present generation, and specifically what it meant for the older generation. All of you are familiar with Land of the Post-Rock, published in 1975 by Grace Meilenberg and Ada Swineford. This is really the Bible. This is my third copy. I've gone through two others, except for my hardback. I was lucky enough to get a hardback edition. This has more source material, more photographs, probably than any other volume. Working with Doris, she asked for more information and that I might have at my disposal. The Kansas Geological Survey has published by county groundwater surveys of all the counties in the state. Sometimes there's 2 counties. These are available in most repositories. Good libraries. This gives a rundown and gives you an idea of what we have in the way of different stone in the counties. And of course, the Geological Survey also has published many other books relating to greenhorn limestone. Donald Hatton has done a lot of technical work in regard to the marine life that was in this strata of stone, and you'll find a lot of his works that through the Geological Survey that would be very important in regard to detail and that sort of thing. So I mentioned these people to you because they are very important if you're going to do research and if you're going to do any in-depth study. Most of my slides, I'm an amateur photographer. I travel a bit. I don't consider myself a professional. I do have several images that come from Land of Post-Rock by Meilenberg and Swineford. The rest of them were taken by myself in my travels. I think it's very important to remind ourselves that as we have so many structures that have fallen down into ruin, that have deteriorated, this gets back to our obligation to study. And just like the project you people are working on now, I think is really important for future citizens and, of course, people within this region. Not only that, but we have many visitors that come through this part of the country, and I think there too, they have a lot to learn by studying what we have in our landscape. And again, this gets back to the obligation that we have to provide them with something of our past. I probably have way too many slides, but I found it very difficult to prepare for this group today. Most of my audiences are civic organizations, church groups. I give some programs to school groups, and you people are exceptional in that you live out here in the region where it is. Most of my audiences are people that I have to give quite a bit of background material on the stone, and therefore, by the time I finish my program, if they have just gained a little bit, I feel that it's been successful. But you folks live out here and work around it. You play around it at Wilson's Lake, so you folks are very well acquainted with this type of stone and the cultural manifestation of the post-rock limestone. A geologist by the name of Cragen was the first one to name the limestone, fence post limestone, in 1896. This was in a published geological survey. And of course, that name stood for a good number of years up until more recent years. We've come to know it as post-rock limestone because so many of our fences are made out of that material. As I indicated earlier, the 1870s seen an influx of foreigners, especially Europeans, equal only to the decade of the American Revolution coming into this country, and Kansas retained received and ultimately retained a good many of those people with different ethnic backgrounds, all the way from your Danish and your Norwegian people in Republic County, all the way down to Bohemian communities in Barton County. And of course, you have the Volga Germans, you have the Czechs at Wilson, you have Czechs in Cuba, and there's the French. Although, albeit the French Canadians at Damar, we have a great influx of people coming into the 1870s in our country, and especially Kansas, central Kansas. And a lot of you probably are part of that ethnic tradition. When the settlers came west, obviously there were no trees to build with. They had to go underground for resources to get to the stone. It was even before railroads came into many of the communities. The eastern part of the state, this is an extension of the Oak Hickory woodland. This is a scene taken out near Junction City. They had trees to build with. There was no problem, no concerns. And a lot of eastern Kansas was built with timber for log cabins, so there was no big deal. It was a greater challenge out here on the plains. This is a cellar where a family lived, an underground cellar for 9 years. 3 children were born here. This one happens to be in Republic County, near the community of Norway. And they ultimately built a home that was a post-rock. This is the interior of that structure. Some of it is sledged out limestone. They got it from the bluffs of the Republican River, on the edge of the Republican River Valley.
Is that drywall construction?
I'm sorry.
Is that drywall?
No, there was some mortar at one point. It's deteriorated. I think they finally moved out in 1881. They initially built that in 1873. A lot of the early settlers built into the bluffs of the rivers. This happens to be on the south bank of the Solomon, a little west of here, in Sheridan County. This is the Pratt family. 3 bachelors lived here for 3 years. But this shows you how the early settlers lived when they came to this country initially, until they had the means to get timber or lumber, or to get under the ground to get the stone for building purposes. This map here you're all probably familiar with. It's a little fuzzy. Let me get this focused. This is my orientation map. It come out of Milenberg and Swineford. This shows you the entire area from northern Republic County, western Washington, all the way down to Buckner Creek and Saw Log Creek, north of Dodge City. This entire area is 200 miles long. You people are in north central Kansas. When I give my talks and presentations, I talk in terms of central Kansas because that's all encompassing. We find as much limestone in Jetmore in terms of the built environment as we find in Beloit. The per capita is the difference. So we do have a great amount of limestone in Ness and Jetmore and even northern Ford County. Coming east, I like to remind people, I don't live in Topeka. I live out of Topeka on a small farmstead, but I do interact with a lot of people that come through Topeka in our museum there. I remind them that there are highways other than Interstate 70. They should travel K-18. They should travel K-4. And the old 40, 24 highway is a good one to travel. If you're going north-south, there's 81, 281, 183, 283, and this is my story to all the people that are going east, west, north, or south in Kansas. This gets them off of the roadway, the travel interstates, gets them in contact with the real world. I'm going to show you a series of slides. This is the contrast between a very large structure. This is in the south of Portland, Republic County. It's been abandoned for a number of years. There's some beehives right there in front of it, but this was used for hay storage like a lot of old abandoned buildings were. One time this was a very attractive structure. This is the Krager House about 4 miles south of Portland in Republic County. At the other extreme is in the Hodgman County. This is actually a stone corral, a very large stone corral, and you can see how massive this structure is. This took a great amount of work, and again, this is the post-rock limestone.
Are we talking?
Geologically, I'm not going to get too technical with you, but this is from the Greenhorn Formation, named from the Greenhorn Station and Greenhorn Creek, which is about 15 miles south of Pueblo, Colorado. So when I talk in terms of Greenhorn, I'm talking in terms of post-rock or fence post limestone. This shows you the extreme in north central all the way to, all the way to, from north to south. And of course, I won't be showing you much in between here.
Do you have a question?
Was that about 4 feet tall? How tall was that?
That corral was about, I would say, about 5 feet tall.
5 feet.
There was a working ranch when I was there about 3 years ago. I've been there a couple of times because there's some very, very nice artwork, and I'll be showing you some of the features a little bit later. But it's about 5.5, maybe even 6 feet tall. You can tell by the gate there. Of course, in terms of the built environment, in terms of structures, we have Cathedral of the Plains, which is at Victoria, built in 1911. At one time, it was considered the largest cathedral west of the Mississippi River. And of course, that structure probably receives more attention than any other structure in post-rock country, mainly because of its location and mainly because of its massiveness. This is a Romanesque style structure, and you find that in a lot of cathedrals. I'm a very informal person. If anybody has a question or comment as I go along, please raise your hand or interject. It won't bother me whatsoever. Then you have the ornate houses like the Hart House in Beloit. This is a very ornate kind of a combination. Victorian house with some Italianate features architecturally. I'm going to talk a little more about it in detail later. Then you have, this is St. John's Church. I apologize for not getting it all. This is one of the 2 spires, Catholic Church at Damar. This is outside of post-rock country in Brooks County. And we know that a lot of post-rock in the old period actually left the 16 to 18 county area. And this is one example. This is a beautiful structure. To me, it's just as ornate as the Cathedral of the Plains in Victoria.
That was Damar?
And of course, right down the road, we have one of the most magnificent structures. This is the mausoleum of S.P. Dinsmore. And I could give you a whole slide program about this, but I won't because obviously you're more acquainted than anybody else, and you can tell me things that...
This couple right here owned the Garden of Eden for a while.
You did own it. Well, I probably met you years ago when I first got acquainted with it.
And my grandfather quarried all the rock for that.
Right. That's really important. This is rather unique structure, as we all know, one of a kind almost in terms of art. And I'll have another comment or two about it. Then you go from the very ornate, the architecturally significant, to areas like, this is in Waldo, right down the highway here, this is an old ruin, probably of a business. So we have the extreme here that I think is really important. We have those that have been retained, and conservation measures have been taken, and then you have the ruins. This photograph is of the Foster Place, south of Jewel. This is one of the most ornate houses I have found in the countryside. As you're taking K-14 north out of Beloit, you'll come on, this is near Buffalo Valley. This was abandoned in the 1930s. You can see all the intricate work on the sills and the lintels. And I'll mention something a little more about it later also. Then, of course, you have many objects. This is a style block in downtown Russell. This was obviously used for boarding carriages and buggies in the 19th century. All the way runs the extreme to entryway gate.
That wasn't Greenhorn, that was it?
This was from, I question Milenberg and Swineford.
But that's been the Eagle Chalk.
The Niobrara chalk,
Yeah.
that could very well have come out of it because it's a thicker formation. We know that Greenhorn is only 8 to 12 inches, so thanks for that clarification. This is a different formation. To the west of Greenhorn, we have the Niobrara chalk, which breaks down into 2 units. One is the Niobrara itself. You find it in the Blues Hills region, and underneath that we find the Fort Hayes limestone, which I have a couple of structures of. This is an old entryway gate to the prisoner of war camp at the 40th, the German prisoner of war camp 43 to 45. And of course we have a lot of vessels that were used in the 19th century, round, rectangular, for feeding purposes as well as watering. I think these are in front of the museum, Post Rock Museum of La Crosse. Okay, I'll talk just a little bit about quarries. We have quarrymen here, and they differ from location to location. We know they're all on ridges and they're all on slopes. You don't find any in the bottom land because Mother Nature has taken care of that over the eons of time. We know that this was the rock itself is sedimentary. It was formed from a great inland ocean during the Cretaceous period about 80 to 120 million years ago. This quarry, where I had the opportunity to work a number of years ago, is a tableland, and this stuff had been exposed for years, and it took us a long time to quarry by hand the post rock. This is north of Gorham, about 6 miles in western Russell County. It was extremely hard. There was very little moisture in it. As you all know, when you have moisture in your stone, it's much, much easier to work. Contrast to that, this is on the Doug Phillip Ranch between Mosier and Viper on Big Creek in southeastern Ellis County. That quarry's been abandoned since the 30s, and Doug Phillip took an interest in it. And some of you may have seen the program on Sunflower Journeys. That photography was taken right there at that location. This shows you the overburden, and in fact, you've got to remove the shale and all the other residue before you can get to the stone itself. This is an abandoned quarry site just south of Lake Wilson, about 3 miles. This was probably a depression 100 yards long and maybe 75 feet. You find this on many farmsteads because many farms in the 19th century had their own quarries. This is another one just to the north of the South Shore Road between Bunker Hill and Lake Wilson. This is the Mill Quarry, which is on Salt Creek southwest of Beloit. I've had the opportunity to work there with Clarence several times. The bulldozer obviously has moved that around, not human beings. There were no earthquakes or anything.
That's a narrower, shallower stone, isn't it? Up north.
Not really. If you look to the left there, there's a block. He went down probably 15 feet. This is a quarry his grandfather worked at the turn of the century. And of course, Clarence had a cottage industry for a number of years, just until recently when he's had, sickness has overcome him, and he's pretty much gotten out of the business altogether. But this was probably 15 to 20 feet, you can tell. And this runs along a ridge of a hill probably for 400, maybe 500 yards. And This quarry was initially established by his grandfather late in the 19th century.
Can I
Yes, sir.
insert anything? Clarence had showed me how, you see how dark red that streak is?
Right.
He would, say split a stone post off, and he could turn that on in and strike that red with a axe, and it would split in two. He showed me how to, I don't know if that's, maybe he's going to talk about that later, but.
Yeah, this is an iron oxide, which is really peculiar. You find it most extensive, or at least in terms of its width, in Mitchell and I think Lincoln counties. Even up into Republic County, you find some, but as you go southwest, you lose it. Sometimes you have two streaks. In some places, in Rush County, you may have 2 or 3 small streaks, but.
When people bring us stones, I can just about tell you where it comes from.
Right. You learn it very
You
quickly.
learn it very quickly, that red streak, how distinct it is, or how, where it's centered, or the farther west, like he says, it gets whiter and without it.
And what's formed the streak?
I'm sorry.
What has formed the streak?
The geologists can't really tell you for sure. They speculate a lot. There was something in that inland ocean which created that. Some of them are saying geologically this was about the end of the Pleistocene era. We had the uplift of the Rocky Mountains. There was a tremendous amount of volcanic activity. There's a lot of volcanic ash in western and central Kansas. They think a phenomenon like that may have created this sort of thing. It could have been a type of marine life. Some of the geologists talk about different types of marine life that may have been, or some kind of vegetative matter that may have intermingled with the marine life, which may have caused that. There was definitely a place there geologically where there was a rapid change which created these streaks.
Well, I've heard this comment, and I've been kind of putting this out, that it's more redder, more distinct in the eastern, northeastern part. So it was said that the iron ore had drifted down from the Minnesota area when it was all under sea.
It could have been less deposits like we find in northern Kansas, and it's much more pronounced as you move into eastern Kansas on the bluffs, northwest Missouri, eastern Nebraska. These were wind-blown as a result of the glacier during the Pleistocene era. And that could have been that from, of course, in eastern Kansas, in that area, we have all the quartzite, which is a very hard stone, which was brought down by the glacier. And it could have been the effects of that, the wind blowing it into this inland ocean. But it's interesting, and I've not found one explanation why we have it. Everybody wants to speculate on it.
Does this greenhorn limestone, is it pretty much on a level clear across this?
On the ridges and the tableland,
Yes,
you find it's on slopes. You don't find it in any watersheds at all.
Yes, but
Is it one elevation?
is it the same
Right.
altitude? We find it the same altitude out 50 miles west of here as we would here, or 50 miles?
Pretty much the same. In fact, greenhorn limestone is about 100 feet deep.
Yeah.
This is the post rock is at the very top of it. Geologists, when they mapped all this 1820 count area, you actually used the greenhorn or the post rock for mapping because it was so prominent. So consequently, they could probably find it at pretty close to the same elevation as you move from northeast to southwest. It was a little different than the shell rock bed, which is what lies 15, 20 feet beneath this, and I'll be talking a little bit about that also. The Fairport member, which is a brick-type structure, was used extensively in a lot of buildings, and it's above the greenhorn. It's in the Carlisle, what they call the Carlisle Shale section.
May I make one other?
Yeah, go right
You
ahead.
said you invited us to comment, so.
Absolutely.
First, when I sit around at shows and stuff with our demonstration a lot, there's always somebody that walks up and makes a comment. Now, a while ago, you made the remark that it's situated on the bluffs and the hills. But when I got up to Stockton, they said you would find it in the lower regions and around the rivers and the creeks.
Stockton?
You know, it was at the Stockton Antique Show when I was.
Oh, I see. Okay.
You see? And so, well, it kind of stood to reason to me that as it's up here in the bluffs, and if it stays on a level plain, with that countryside rising in elevation, well, then it might be in the lower regions.
Well,
I
yeah,
haven't traveled out there and I haven't really looked at it, but I just wondered,
well,
said so. He said you could find, the quarries there are in the lower and in the valleys.
yeah, they are. The quarry I showed you on the Doug Phillip Ranch between Viper and Mungier, it's at a, down near Big Creek, which isn't on a bluff necessarily.
Okay, I just wondered if that was-
So, I mean, you're not gonna find it, say, at the top of Dakota Stone, where you folks are here, where it's so prominent. We do have that transition here, obviously, from east to west, Dakota Stone into the Greenhorn Limestone. So it's going to vary from location to location. In this country up here, in Russell, Mitchell, you're going to find it on the bluffs, I think, more so than you are down in the lowlands, like
You
in
don't
the
find it on the
southwest.
southwest. It's always on the bluffs.
Yeah, it's all bluff. This is one of the historic photographs I got in Russell County a number of years ago. I have very few historic photographs. I went through all of our photographs in our archives at the Kansas State Historical Society. This is really a neat photograph, probably taken in the 1880s, 1890s, just in the period dress. There are about 20 guys working here, or at least 20 guys have gotten this photograph. They're quarrying, they're dressing, and it looks like they're either laying up an example there on the left. You see all kinds of mules, and there's a lot to be gained from a photograph of this nature. Somewhere in Russell County, the people at the Fossil Creek Museum couldn't tell me anything beyond the fact that it was taken in Russell County. And I went to our floating curators, and they told me that they're in Topeka. They said this is probably late 1880s, 1890s. So if you come across any old photographs of people working quarries, hang on to them and share it with the rest of us, would you? Of course, transporting the stone. This is the one behind the Garden of Eden, I think. And is it still there? But this was a difficult job, carrying those 350 to 500 pound stones from one place to the other, and they were especially difficult for Dinsmore, moving those 22 feet long posts in to build his home. But this is an example of the old way of carting it from the quarry to where your building site was or your fence line. And of course, this is a more modern way. We have a boom and of course some hydraulics. This is moving into the back. This post is going into the back of the pickup truck. So the contrast there, mechanization changes the whole industry. We know it peaked out about World War I, and of course there was a resurgence of activity during the WPA period of the Depression. A lot of structures were built. I want to talk just a little bit about fences because most of the visitors through our country only see post-rock limestone in the form of fences. They never get off the highway long enough to study the buildings and so forth. Traditional spacing between the fence posts was a rod, 16.5 feet. And of course, later on, I think one reason for that is they didn't have the great number of cattle in the fields. You'll see here that somebody has put in an iron post or steel T-post, and this was quite common as herds got bigger and so forth. But 16.5 feet, and you'll still see a lot of fields with that spacing of 16.5 or a rod apart. This particular line fence line was taken down west of Hoisington, and again, it just typifies the importance of it was in the late 19th century for building. I might mention, of course, the whole concept of fencing in central western Kansas coincided with the ranchers and the farmers. You had struggle over who was going to fence, who wasn't going to fence. So you have all this turmoil developing in addition to people getting settled. And of course, people are wanting the herd law. The herd law finally becomes the law of the land in the early 1880s. But, and of course, you know, the farmers wanted everything fenced in. The ranchers, they wanted everything to roam all over the countryside. That was really a difficult time in the settlement of this country. Most people don't recognize that. So the fence posts really made a big difference in terms of substitute material for wood and for steel. We only see wooden posts coming into vogue in this country probably before World War I, used extensively, and of course the extensive labor utilized in quarrying stone pretty much dictated that some other form of fencing was necessary. This is just another corner post arrangement, which I think is very picturesque. You see them everywhere. This is a spike fence, which has an interesting history, and most of you are familiar with this type of fencing, aren't you? This is out of the book I showed you. Back to buildings now. I want to spend a little bit of time on churches, houses, and then we're going to get into some other structures, barns. This is, again, another shot of the Cathedral of the Plains down in Victoria, which shows how massive it is. This is a Gothic in architectural style. This is the Holy Cross Church near Pfeiffer, a Volga German community. As you know, within a 15-20 mile radius of Hayes, we have about 10 or 12 cathedrals that were built by this ethnic group. This church, all these churches have different names, other than whether it's a Catholic or whatever. Of course, most of them were all Catholic churches. There are a few Lutheran churches, but this one had the nickname of the Two-Penny Church. And the reason it was called a Two-Penny Church is because the parishioners were bound to donate 2 cents on every bushel of wheat they raised. That's how this structure was built. Unfortunately, this particular structure, which has a great amount of Gothic detail, is no longer functional because the parishioners have either died out or they've moved. I have a real concern about what's going to happen to this structure. This is the Ada Lutheran Church in the Norwegian and Scandinavian area of Republic County. You can see the original part was built in 1884. It has a new steeple. The original one was wood. They put steel one on about 5 years ago. To the left, you see the wings are a different color. It's because it was a later addition, probably in the 1920s, 1930s. So it's still the greenhorn limestone, but you can see the differentiation between the old and the new here. This is St. John's Catholic Church in Jamestown, which is northeast of Concordia. This shows you probably it's a pitch face type of limestone that was used. Some of it is rough and it's definitely not finished. You see the architectural styles, the long, deep, and of course curved lintels over the windows. This is the St. John's Church at Damar, the one I showed you, one of the steeples of Wallerville. This is a magnificent structure. If you ever buy there, go inside. It's open all the time. To me, it rivals, surpasses the beauty of the Cathedral of the Plains of Victoria. This is some of the interior, very ornate and a lot of sophisticated trim. This one you're all familiar with. This is St. John the Baptist Catholic Church in Beloit. It has a combination of Gothic, Romanesque type of architecture with all the everything is very symmetrical. You see the doors in the right location. You have the variation in the windows, the bell towers, the steeples, which is really an interesting form of architecture. This church is St. Anne's Catholic Church at Walker. They recently painted the steeple. Again, this is one of the many Volga German churches in and around that area. A lot of Gothic design on it. This one's the Episcopal Church in Ellsworth. I show it to you because you have the Dakota limestone used as a primary building material, and then of course dressed with the post-rock limestone. This has some interesting detail on it. I'll give you a little more information on it later on, but this was quite common in this country, especially where you have the gradation between Dakota limestone and the greenhorn or post-rock limestone. Dressing the coins and the doors, the windows, the lintels, the sills, and so forth. It really makes it stand out. This is a detailed shot of the window. You see how some of that has weathered. You see the different curvatures on that arched lintel, which I think is really neat. A lot of handwork went into this. One thing I want to point out now, I'm going to talk about a little later on, when they repointed his church, they used pure Portland cement. That's the last thing you want to do when you repoint a building of soft limestone. And The greenhorn or post rock is about 75–80% calcium carbonate, which means there's a lot of lime in it. It's soft stone compared, say, to the cottonwood limestone, which is in our state capital in Topeka. Cottonwood is quarried in Chase County. When you put something hard like Portland next to something soft like the post rock limestone, it has a tendency to literally tear it away over a period of time. The freeze-thaw action, and so many structures you're going to see this morning has been pointed up with Portland, which is the worst thing you can do from a preservation standpoint. Historically, the mortar mixes, most of you aren't interested in this, but if you care about your structure, somebody needs to know this. Traditionally, you have one part lime to 2 parts sand. That's how it was done. We find some buildings that were put up with clay or just plain soil in the countryside because they didn't have the lime and there weren't that many kilns around. Today, what we recommend, and I have a handout if somebody would like one, what we recommend for pointing up a greenhorn limestone is 1 part Portland, 6 parts lime, and 8 to 12 parts sand. And to me, that is really important if you care about the future of your buildings. Portland will literally tear away your stone after a period of time. This is an interesting, very simple church, rectangular in design. It doesn't have some massiveness. There's nothing architecturally significant. This is in Republic County, southwest part of Republic County, settled by the Scandinavians. Church of Saran, which is a Baptist church. You see the arch over the main entryway. The little opening, probably ventilation, has in more recent years been plugged shut with some kind of brick and masonry work. There's a lot of lichens. I think this is all shell rock. I don't think there's the big, thick. Might mention that shell rock is found predominantly in the northern part of the post rock country, and you run out of it as you go to the south and southwest. It wasn't used. This church you're all familiar with. This is, again, is the Danish Evangelical Community Church, Denmark. This is another angle to the south elevation. This is an old abandoned Lutheran church just west of Beverly, north on K-18. Those walls are in plumb as the day they were built. It just overwhelms me to know that the craftsmanship on these buildings are as good today as they were 100, 120 years ago. This is a Gothic church. This is in Rush County, Liebenthal, the community. You can't see, but I got right in the middle of it. Down at the bottom, I have a fence post that covers part of the door. This church burnt several times. I think this is St. Joseph Church, Catholic Church. Again, this is part of the Volga German community. It was burnt twice and it was rebuilt twice. Most of you are familiar with this church. It's an old Lutheran church, which is now a museum in Bunker Hill. You see the sledged out stone, which was very prominent in the early period when you didn't have a lot of instruments to quarry or dressing hammers, tooth chisels, and that sort of thing. So there's a bulkiness about this structure, which I think is really important as you see, compare it against the finished surfaces of different structures. Again, the hard house, you can see the detail over the windows, the linens, the sills. Somebody went to a great amount of work. Of course, Mr. Hart was a banker. He had plenty of money, and he could be extravagant. But to me, this is one of the more beautiful houses in the entire region. Well kept to this day. This house you're probably all familiar with. I think it's between Lucas and Sylvan Grove on the north side of the highway. What makes this structure unique is the dormers on the roof, which in the mansarded roof, which is a flat roof at the very top. But these windows were built both into the side of the wall and into the dormers, if you'll notice. And that's really pretty unique. Somebody went to the extra effort to build those windows down into the walls of the structure and up into the dormer section. So they had plenty of daylight. This is Charles Schaefer House north of Bunker Hill. a massive structure. Again, you have the bottom part built out of the greenhorn regular member, and then I think the upper part was either out of Fairport chalk, which is about 4 inches, or it was split on the iron oxide street where you have again about 4-inch blocks. This is a huge structure. It's been occupied for a number of years. This is an abandoned house in eastern Rush County, west of Albert. We come across it a number of years ago, exploring the countryside. It was intact, a beautiful home, and it wouldn't take a lot of work to restore that house. This is a chateau in design. It's in Minersville area of northeast Cloud County. It was north of the prisoner of war camp. This was a big coal mining community in the late 19th century, and I think the gentleman that lived here obviously had plenty of money, but it still has a slate roof. There's a lot of ornateness, and this is a different style structure. There's nothing symmetrical about it, but there's a lot of ornateness you see on the gingerbread, on the soffit, and the gable ends of the house. This is a George Grant villa. He was one of the original members of the English colony. They come over in the 1870s to play tennis and shoot jackrabbits and buffalo on the high plains down by Victoria. He stayed on, introduced Aberdeen Black Angus cattle. This is what you might call English countryside type of architecture. This house is in excellent shape, and of course it's still a working ranch. This is about 8 miles south of Victoria. And we're back home again. This structure has always amazed me, how he could move 22-foot logs from his quarry site intact into the structure itself.
He put a bridge plank underneath it.
The wagon?
And lengthened the wagon out, and then you took a bar and you raised it up, a few inches, and you stuck a hard man put a little rock under that, and you raised it a few more inches, and you got it up to the bolster, and you put a chain around it underneath the bridge plank too, and you had to lengthen that wagonette. You got another 2x4 and lengthen that cup and fold in there. Now, that's the way Granddad got it in.
Well, at best, it was a tremendous undertaking, and of course, this structure is very, very significant.
Well, this old gentleman, he wanted that to be like a log cabin, so this is the only building I know of where he dovetailed that stone.
Notched the ends.
And why he did it, he was...
Like this.
Yes, yes.
That's very, very unique feature. I've not seen it either. This is the Larkin Mansion southwest of Ellsworth. At one time, it had a large steeple. This is an example of, this was a 4-story house. They had a large tower on it at one time. This was a combination of stylistically Italianate and probably some Victorian features. I have some more detail I'll show you a little later on. All of you are familiar with this structure east of Beloit. It's a tragedy in my estimation. This is District Number 3 schoolhouse. I took this about a year and a half ago. If you see this structure in Milenberg and Swineford, it was intact and a very, very beautiful place. This is probably dressed in shell rock on the quoins and around the windows and the doors. It's really not in good shape. It's a shame somebody hasn't taken and done something with it. I think this thing was built in 1878, 1877. Hope I'm not stepping on somebody's feet. I feel strongly about some of these structures. This is another example of schoolhouse northeast of Concordia in Cloud County. You see they pointed here with Portland. This schoolhouse is in excellent shape. The bell tower is deteriorating, but again, another example of educational pursuits. This is in the Brookville community, another example. Dakota stone used primarily with the dress portion being the post-rock limestone over the lintels and the sills, and you see the table, the water table also made out of out of the post rock. All of you know what a water table is? That's a protruding element that comes out near the base of your structure, and I'm going to show you a little more of that. That was both functional, primarily functional to keep the water from away from your foundation. It splashed away rather than into your foundation. Since so many of the houses didn't have eave-troughs. This is the WPA project down around Antonino in southern Ellis County. This simple country school. As I indicated earlier, there was a lot of activities, resurgence of activity. A lot of people were out of work. A lot of craftsmen, artisans went to work on all sorts of projects during the Depression period. This is used as a community center today. Now to barns, I had a few shots of barns. This is an old barn which just east of Bunker Hill on Highway 40. Unfortunately, this was in excellent condition. The roof needed a little bit of work on it, but it was torn down about 2 years after I took a number of images of it. Very stable, and it would have served another generation with a little bit of TLC. This is the bank barn in Republic County, south of Portland. The east, we're looking at the south elevation. The ventilation there obviously was used for some sort of grain storage. The east elevation is a walkout area, and no doubt the upper level was used for hay storage. This is a granary in Hodgman County on the Fresher property. Obviously, it's weathered several storms. Most of this, I'm going to be talking a little more about the Fresher property, but it was constructed, all the buildings on this, including this one, was constructed in the 1870s. An example, again, of how far south you find the greenhorn limestone. This is abandoned chicken coop west of Russell, right off. It's been demolished too. This is a barn north of 40, right off of 81 Highway. Looked like an implement shed. Again, it's been pointed up the wrong mixture. This is a smokehouse that I found in the rural part of Republic County. It has Scandinavian features. This was a Scandinavian ethnic group. We have, again, more Norwegians, Danish people. The roof is, conical roof is also it's stone. When I found it, I got into the door, I got permission from the Johnson family who had moved to Topeka, and the hooks that hung the sides of pork and beeves were actually still hanging down. So I don't know how long it had not been in use. But I checked with the historian in Republic County. This structure is south and east of Portland. And this particular style actually goes back to the old country in Sweden. Obviously, their smokehouses, some of their outbuildings were circular rather than square or rectangular, which I found very, very interesting. This is another shot of it from the west. You see the iron oxide streak in the greenhorn. The top of it, I couldn't tell whether it's made out of the Fairport member or the shell rock member. It had discolored considerably. That structure is still intact. There was some talk of actually moving it into the museum grounds in Belleville. I hope they don't, because I think they would lose so much of it. And then, I don't know, I grew up with outdoor toilets. This is a stone outdoor toilet, the first one I'd ever seen. This is on the Krager property I showed you early on in our program. The Krager house, this was constructed in the 1880s. This is the front part, which is fairly shaded. It was a three-holer, and I couldn't figure out how in the world they managed, because, you know, you grow up with outdoor toilets, you move them around. They're wooden, right? You don't move this one around. So I was concerned about how they got the waste out of here. So I went to the back, and there was a lot of debris and limbs and that sort of thing. But they had put in a concrete pit about 3 or 4 feet below where the waste, and they literally must have hauled that out by hand every once in a while. So that outdoor toilet was very unique. The only other stone outdoor toilet I have seen is on a school property west of Topeka in Wabunsee County. I think it was a WPA project, but they had 2 stone for the different sexes, 2 stone outdoor toilets. It wasn't made out of the greenhorn limestone. How many of you seen a stone outdoor toilet? I'd like to see a show of hands. Nobody. Okay. Water tanks were used quite prominently. Here I'm just showing you a whole random example of different structures. This happens to be in Olmutz, north of Olmutz. That's what, Barton County, I think, northwestern Barton County. Lined with concrete, obviously. This dates back a number of years. We have silos. This is also on the same property. We have water towers like we have at Paradise, which is a magnificent structure, and it dates from WPA period 1838 or 39, I can't recall. Different type structure. One of our historic sites is Fort Hays. This is probably the oldest stone structure in western Kansas. It wasn't made out of greenhorn limestone. Hays, as we know, is a transition zone between greenhorn limestone and what we call, from the Niobrara Formation, the Fort Hays limestone, which is softer, it's bulkier. So it was made out of this in 1867. It was quarried just south of Fort Hays, and this photograph was taken in 1873. This is a structure today. We recently had a lot of work done on it. We used the same quarry that was used in the 1860s with the permission of Fort Hays University to quarry that same location, because we had, you can see some of the patching we've done on it there. Again, this isn't the post-rock limestone, but it's a transition zone between that. Hays generally is recognized as that area. And then, of course, Pete Felton, all of you are familiar with his art and sculpture. He did this Monarch of the Plains, which sits at Fort Hays, and the base of it is the greenhorn limestone. The buffalo itself is Bedford, Indiana limestone, which he uses a lot for his sculpture of three-dimensional objects. Pete also did some bas relief in the different frontier scenes. I think one of those is a railroad. There's several different scenes on each elevation of that base. And at La Crosse, the museum, this is a telephone pole they have on the grounds. This is a hitching post, which were very common in the 19th, early 20th century. This is a railroad culvert west of between Belleville and Mankato, just north of Highway 36. It is used extensively by a number of railroads for drainage. This is one just east of Victoria on the Union Pacific line. You can see that it was used extensively for water, for running cattle from one pasture to another. This is probably a waterway, I think. Okay. I know I'm running out of time, so I'll hurry. Dwayne, I'm ready for you to say something. Give me a break.
Is there any way you can date older structures, either by what type of mortar or color of mortar or anything
Yeah, you
to
can
get
find
close?
that. I'll show you a couple of structures where you have the native mixture.
Okay.
That wouldn't hold true. We had some people that were more knowledgeable. We lost the stonemason, the people that were to maintain these structures. We lost a lot with it, other than just dressing and crafting the stone and the detail that went on the stone. Mm-hmm. We lost the use. It was a lot easier, you know, we're a throwaway society. Why go to all the trouble to get river sand and lime, and you can go to the hardware store and get all the Portland you want. So it's a quick fix, but in the long run, it's very damaging to your structure. This is a courthouse at Beloit, which I think is one of the more magnificent structures built in 1901. Architectural style is Richardsonian Romanesque, which is a fancy word to say that it's just awful sharp.
I like to say it.
But again, functional building, I'm always attracted to this. Lincoln County also has a nice one. Of course, there's one in Jewell, and one made out of post-rock, only more modern in Ellis County in Hayes. There's about 7 or 8 courthouses. This is another angle from the southwest.
Only
Uh,
only comment I have about Lincoln's and Beloit is I like the interior Lincoln's. but-
At Lincoln?
Yeah, it's more roomy or comfortable or openness or something. And that always
Yeah,
seems-
there's more clutter in the one in Beloit.
And when you walk in that door, it's just a dark hallway, you know, like,
Yeah.
it seems to me. That's just what I've noticed through the years.
I would agree with you. This is an example, another example of WPA project. This is a municipal building in Russell, old city offices. As I indicated, it was a real upsurge of interest in the 1930s. All of you familiar with this at Wilson, the old Midland Hotel, which is a Renaissance style with the high dormers and everything in symmetrical shape here. That was very popular. This is on the north side of the tracks, for those of you that don't know Wilson, but I'm sure that many of you have seen the structure. I don't think anything's in it at the present time.
No, there's not.
It's a shame.
We used to get rid
Yeah,
of
there's
that
a lot of talk
trashy little
about
thing
that.
down there.
This is one of the more unique grain elevators this was torn down a number of years ago
My
in Hayes.
goodness.
It's set beside the Union Pacific track. This is Italianate sort of detail architecture. This elevator was constructed in 1889. I haven't seen anything that large that served as a grain elevator anywhere. Like I said, there are a lot of photographs, and I don't have a lot of history on this structure, but Ellis County Historical Society does have it. It's got a mansarded roof, which is a flat roof, and very spatial, very ornate to hold grain. This is south side of the tracks at Wilson, and the Opera House, and that whole block is nothing but greenhorn limestone. There has been some improvements made. I think it's fascinating to study the different styles and the ornateness there. That block. This is a little closer to home. This is Luray. I shot this a number of years ago. This shows pride in communities and what they can do if they really want to improve up and improve their structure. I don't know what's in this, but the proprietor, the people that did this really deserve a great amount of attention.
Lynn Lehman.
I was
the
listening to
painting
her,
on
what
the
she
front
was
end.
saying,
That's the Posh Fischel building.
I'm sorry?
That's the Posh Fischel building.
Is it?
All right.
Oh.
The painting was done by Lynn Lehman.
Is that right?
They did a
Still working.
fantastic job.
It's the senior center on the right-hand side and Ted Bean's office is on
when you drive by these things, you really don't notice sometimes, you know, in front of that building's pretty.
I wondered when she was painting that, how historical this painting on the stone is. I went through a town in Wisconsin that was done exactly like that.
Oh.
But I wondered, when they originally built the buildings, they didn't paint on the stone, did they? Or did they?
Was there paint?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was quite common to cover up things. As we well know with wood, you ever get a nice piece of furniture just plastered with paint.
Was that a way of disguising a tin face or something?
I think it was mode. I think it was popular to paint over. You didn't want, that generation didn't want to see grain. They've seen grain, different wood grain all their life. They wanted to paint it because that was mode and popular.
I'm not sure that's stone that she's painted on there.
I don't know. What is the front of that building?
The style?
What's that?
No,
The front of the building, is that a stone front or was that a wood front in that building?
Oh, the porch is metal, I think.
And what about the upper part? Is that stone?
There's stone, most of that is stone in my recollection.
I don't, that's what I'm saying. I've been by.
Somebody
many times
did a
there.
tremendous amount of work on the front of that. There's a lot of intricate carving and cuttings, and there's not a lot of curvilinear, linear, what I call curved lines. We do have some of that on lintels and sills, but this is primarily rectangular, block, square type cutting, dressing with the
Sure,
stone.
that's.
There are some historical pictures of that being made, I think.
I'm sorry.
There are some historical pictures of that building. being
Are there
made.
really? Yeah. It would be nice to compare against that. This is the Post-Rock Museum of Lacrosse. Many of you probably been there. They put on an addition in recent years. This structure isn't original. It was moved in from out west along K96, if I recall, when they created the museum. They've got a lot of neat objects and things at this museum. I used to know the curator. She died a number of years ago. She was just had story after story, and like many of you in this room, you have a lot of memories about post-rock limestone, how it was quarried, dressed, and so forth. Likewise, a lot of people in La Crosse knew a lot about this stone, how it was used. All of you are familiar at Glen Elder with the medieval castle design. This is on the National Register. You kind of got a drawbridge effect. Mr. Norris built this in 1926, 1929. He'd been stationed in the Netherlands in World War I, and he was close to this medieval castle, and he said, I'm going home and build these. That's neat. But I'm very proud they used the right border mix, and of course, I think some people in our organization assisted them when they did restore it, but this place is really a unique piece of architecture. Bridges, I do have one at Spillman Creek, Delane. I didn't bring it today, forgive me. This happens to be a 3-arch bridge over in the Rush, Ellis, Russell County line, just about that corner, that northeastern corner. A lot of these are WPA projects. This is one built 1938-39. I marvel at the amount of work that went into these things. A little bit of maintenance, they'll be here another 100, 150 years. This is one of the rebuilt guardhouses at Camp Concordia, held German prisoners World War II. This is entryway to the Vesper Cemetery. A lot of you are probably familiar with that structure. The pedestals I thought were really unique. And again, I think you have variation between shell rock, the whiter rock on the top, the pedestal, and of course the base I think is the main greenhorn. Cemeteries, this is one, a lot of gravestones are made out of this. This happens to be in the Bunker Hill Cemetery. It's weathered a lot, but still pretty intact after being there for, what, 80 years. And this is in Luray. The last time I visited Doris, I fell in love. I spend a lot of time in cemeteries. You can find a lot about your history and about your past in the cemetery. My wife, she gives me a bad time about that. I endure it, and I love to look at the artwork. This is sitting on some type of limestone. I don't know if it's a greenhorn, but the base of it, you see the margin, how it's been worked. It's got some broached work in the middle. We're getting into some detail now. The mason did some very intricate, probably with a pointing tool. This is in that same cemetery. Shows you what you can do with the stone. As we all know, when it's wet, it can be notched, carved, sawed, anything imaginable with it. When it dries out and gets hard, it gets much more harder to work. And this is a very recent one. They put a Portland concrete slab footing in, and they put the greenhorn on top of it with the dates and so forth. I find that very interesting. Of course, all the communities bragged of their flagstone sidewalks. This is in Beloit, east, or just south of the St. John's Catholic Church, St. John the Baptist Catholic Church. A lot of communities prided themselves on their flagstone sidewalks, and many of them are still around. I think Lincoln has a good number of them, and I find them in Hayes and Russell. Okay, a little detail. This is on that chateau-type architecture. This is in the gable end of it. Since it was a coal mining community, you see some of the ornate work there, the gingerbread stuff on the soffit and fascia board. Since this was a coal mining community, they engraved and painted red a gear which symbolized that it was a mining community, which I felt was really, really unique. You can see the sides. This window isn't normal. You got both the sill and the header. You've got slabs on both sides of the window, greenhorn. And the mason, he pockmarked it with some kind of a sharp instrument. You see that in quite a few of the stone structures. Some of the detailed work. This again is the Danish Evangelical Church of Denmark. Some of the detail, the work that went into it, the arch, I just have part of the arch. Right hand, the mason did a superb job. This is over the east elevation. You see the keystone up there in the top, and there's some relief carving on it. The curved lintel above the window. Gothic type design that you find, long windows.
Was any group more likely to ornament than another?
I'm sorry.
Was any group more likely to ornament on lentils and things than another, like the Scandinavians? Was any ethnic group more likely to ornament?
I think you see a combination wherever you go. If we looked at detail on the Ada Lutheran Church in the Norwegian community of Republic County, if you go to Jetmore and Hodgman County, you're going to see it there. I think all of them had that capability. It'd be nice if a person went through all the records to see who these stonemasons were. That might be possible if you get into newspaper files and that sort of thing, because a lot of the local history will tell you the ethnic background of where that person was living, and you can tell by their surname. You know. But I think the majority of Masons by the 1880s and 1890s, I guesstimated maybe 75 to 80% of them had come from Europe, working in these communities. Of course, there were some from the eastern part of the United States, but I think there was a tremendous amount of European influence that went into the structure and the detail of these buildings. This is just an example of a historic mortar mix. This is in that hammer house. I showed you the underground cave where the people lived for 7 or 8 years. This is the part of the structure they ultimately built. This shows you the complete face of the stone. It was dressed down. You find that on many structures. Here you see a lot of sand and you see a lot of lime and no Portland, very little Portland in this. In fact, Portland wasn't even manufactured. Again, the detail on the hard house, you got the lintels, the sills, the coins around the windows. Here you've got the shell rock, which accentuates with the greenhorn limestone. It makes a great contrast. And a lot of structures were designed that way, with the coins around doors and windows, and of course the bay windows in this case being completely out of the shell rock limestone. This shows you simple lintel and sill, no ornamentation at all, just the stonemason's marks of his chisel or hammer, probably his stonemasonry hammer. And you compare that against, this is another one, this is the house I showed you. Here you've got a margin around the lintel. The stonemason did go to a little extra work. I don't know which entryway, this is the south entryway into that house. This is the house I showed you with the unique dormers between Lucas and Silken Grove on the north side of the highway. You could look in one door and out the other when I was there several years ago. Then you have the contrast. This is the Foster House in Jewell County. You can see all the work they went to, both on the water table and the vertical columns and the sill itself. So you have a real contrast. It depends, I suppose, in part on how wealthy the homeowner was and also how much time they had. But Mr. Foster, I found out that he did have a tremendous Osage orange hedge operation, and he supplied a lot of the fencing material that went into hedge in southern Jewell and northern Mitchell County. That was one of his strong suits, was raising Osage orange hedge. I'm sure he was a cattleman too. This again shows you some of the ornamentation over the door of the Foster place. I took 2 slides at this residence because of how fancy some of the work was. You notice just below on both sides of the window you have a bulky carved out part of the greenhorn limestone, which is another feature I've seen on other structures, but you don't find it all that often. This shows you some of the fine work. This would be broached work on the entryway to the Little Simple Baptist Church in the Danish community in southwestern Cloud County. There's a little flute work there where you have the round curvature on the stone. This practically all was built with shell rock limestone. You see the thickness, you don't have the 8 or 12 inches. This was pretty rough on the main building stone. You do see the mark left by the mason. It wasn't uncommon for the stonemason to leave his name. This was Peter Christensen. You see up at the upper part there on the extended coin on the corner. They recessed the corners, which was a common feature of the stonemason. This structure has a lot of little neat detail, and it tells you a lot about the work and the knowledge of the stonemason. Have any of you ever seen a stonemason leaving his name on a building? I've only seen that in several instances. He was very proud of it, and to this day, this church dates from 1877. They restored it. This just shows the archway over a barn east of Jamestown in Republic County. This is a very old door, which was actually, the top was made into an arch, and I'm sure, I didn't look at the ironwork hinges, but I'm sure that they would have dated back many years also. This is back to the house I showed you initially, and I'm almost through, bear with me. The left-hand part was built of the greenhorn limestone, much thicker. It was built first, about 10 years later. Mr. Krager built an addition to the west of the house. He has this archway porches leading to the part that was made out of shell rock limestone. This is the mansard roof. I don't have it there, but this shows you the contrast and some of the detail that this gentleman had his stonemason do. This is an archway to a barn, just west of Gorham, and this is I find very unusual on barns. I haven't looked at all the barns by any means, but to find the intricate archway with the keystone is really pretty different. That date stone from 1910, I believe. You do find a lot of date stones on structures in post-rock country. Here again we have some detail. This is the keystone above the lintel on the Hammer House in Republic County. The brooch work you see in the keystone itself shows that they went to a little bit of effort, the mason did, to leave his mark or his design. Again, this is the detail on the Episcopal Church, which shows the intricate work and how not to use mortar for pointing. This is on District 3 School, which shows the coins and the sills. The water table there is just one there. In some structures you find maybe 2 or 3 water tables, but the mason went to a lot of work on his margins and the broached work on the coins and on the sills. This is the arch over the entryway into that same schoolhouse. I think it's 1883 when it was constructed. This is a unique structure. This is in northern Barton County. I talked water tables. This is a barn, and they have, of course, it was laid up in courses, but you have 3 water tables. I checked this detail with an architectural historian. They thought that was very, very unique on a barn. They had 3 courses of water tables. The bulkiness over the window is really pretty different. You can see all the stone is dressed down by hand. It's not pitch face. This is another elevation showing the detail arch, the fish scale shingles over the barn. This is in a Bohemian community in northern Barton County. This is a little house, very ornate. It was fenced off for cattle. I didn't get permission, so I couldn't go up to the house, and I always ask permission when I visit a place. But the lintels and the sills, the ornateness, this is just before you get to Highway 40 north of Beloit. It sits on the east side of the road, and there was a couple of other structures I wanted to spend some time on. I didn't have time to seek out the landowner. Very ornate, very, very nice piece of architecture. It's fallen down, by the way. This is an archway to the Midland Hotel in Wilson. As we know, it had a bar at one point. The red marks on the underside of the archway is the remains of that. Again, this was all stained glass. If you look in the Land of Post Rock by Meilenberg and Swineford, they had stained glass all over that. This is one panel left intact over one of the arched windowways. But again, it shows you the arch lintel over the window, the bulkiness. Back to the Hodgman property in, I'm sorry, the Fresher property in Hodgman County. This ranch was in operation, I think, 1878. There we go. That other archway, this goes into the yard of his home. He has snakes on both columns, and at the top he has his brand name. He has a steer, and of course, in this arch, this is on the east side of the house. This one happens to be on the south side of the house. Those are all one piece. So it gives you some idea of what you can do with arches if you really want to work with it. This is on the same property. I show you this photograph. This is not far from that massive stone corral. This is a building. It looked like a livestock building that has been put up with probably 8 to 10 feet tall slabs of limestone. The extreme north end of that building had been built with slabs of limestone, which I felt was an overwhelming effort on their part. They've got the straps on the corners, the steel to tie it into. This farm is really an interesting farm to visit because of all. They have a post line driveway that have all tapered fence posts leading up to the home, and there's a lot of unique detail on that site. Again, some of the detail on the Larkin Mansion. I'm almost through. This shows you some of the work, which makes it kind of Victorian in style. The arch, the vertical joints over the window lintels and sills. This shows you the leaves and the acorns at the top on the lintel. It shows you the kind of a scroll type pattern with anchors. This is on the first level. On another level, you've got different designs of ornateness. It's a magnificent site to visit, I told her. It's owned by the Dees now, who've opened the first motel in Ellsworth. This is just being south of Ellsworth. This is a magnificent structure to study. And some of the modern uses. This is a nature trail we have at Huntington Village in Republic County, one of our sites. And the trailhead sign rests on a post, and of course we have a bench that's made out of limestone. I wonder who would have made that.
Beats me, there's so many.
We have the artisan right here. Beautiful entryway sign going into Delphus Auto County. This is one I found more recently between Bunker Hill and Claflin. That's a township road. I think it's just the west edge of Ellsworth and the other county line. This was a ranch established obviously in 1873. I can't tell you any more about it other than somebody did some pretty nice work on the sign. At Fort Hays, a couple years ago, at one time there was 30-some structures at Fort Hays. There's only 4 standing today. We do have the foundations, which you see in the upper right-hand corner. We do have the foundations of all the other structures. So what we decided to do was put signage telling what the structure was, and we quarried out limestone at Doug Phillip Ranch and brought up there to set these signs on. This shows you some of the more contemporary way of using the stone. This is shell rock limestone holding up the kittle filled with flowers. This is on the Scott property just west of Beverly. This is some of his work. I don't know if he's still doing it. I took this photograph a number of years ago. He still could be working. I don't know, he was retired. Do you know if he's still working?
I think he is. I'm going to meet with him tonight on another project, so I'll find
You know what?
Said I'm meeting with him tonight on another project.
Are you really? Yeah.
We're working with that Dunlop's Bridge and the grant for that. And
Oh, yeah.
We have the Lincoln County Preservation Board formed, and he's one of the members. And
Oh,
we're meeting
great.
tonight for the first time.
He's a nice fellow. I haven't seen him for a couple of years. This is this is what you can do with salvage limestone. This is a new sign that was put up by the city of Hayes. It's there on Commerce Parkway to the south, not far from the airport. Pete Felton did the train. He sculptured the train that sits on top. If you're down at Hayes, take a look at it. It's really neat. They salvaged all the limestone and then he carved the stuff out of greenhorn. You can make basins. This is one I made a number of years ago, and I seem to have a tendency to like vessels and basins. I make round and rectangular ones and every other sort of size and shape. This happens to be for our dogs, and of course I tell people, you never worry about your neighbor's dog coming and stealing it. This is a triangular piece, which I make a few of them for planters, planting flowers and so forth in. Different shapes and sizes. I guess the height of gratification was, we had folk arts section in the Kansas Museum of History. We hauled in a 2,000-pound slab from the mill quarry, set it up and showed the technique of splitting it out. We brought in a couple of objects. I think they were vessels, that sort of thing. This was in 1989. And just a couple more. We don't have a monopoly in central Kansas on limestone fences. This is in on the Morris-Lyon County line in the Flint Hills. You'd be surprised the number of fences made out of limestone in the Flint Hills. Nothing like central Kansas. You can see how they put the hook in to hold the fence up. And actually these posts are mounted onto a base of stone. Here you get the idea. Actually, before the post was put on the base, they run an iron rod to go up to the center of the post itself. Around Dunlop, again, just east of Council Road is where you see this type of fencing. Here's one that's leaning. This is the same location. We talk about prairie fires and how they withstand all the elements of time. I threw this one in to show that they start deteriorating away. The powder post beetle got this one. All of you know what the powder post beetle is? It's an insect, but they're very common in eastern United States. I'm joking. These are lean because they're leaning because of the wear and tear over the years. One of my most favorite photographs, it shows the ingenuity, the resourcefulness of the people that settled the 19th century. This is on the Long property in northern Barton County. This post, it's a support post. It broke on them at some point. They actually drilled holes on all the corners and put in smooth wire to keep that post intact. And it's really symbolic of the character of the people that settled this country. They threw nothing away like we are wont to in our generation. My last photograph, this image come out of a 1937 issue of the National Geographic. The young lad there, he's a Depression product. He's got patches all over him. He looks dirty and grimy, but he's leaning up against the post rock. And what it does tell us that he represents the future. We represent the future. We have an obligation to retain and perpetuate our heritage, as he did, no doubt. The stone he's leaning up against represents the past and how it was created from the past, its significance, how it was going to fit into our cultural landscape. So, with that note, I'm finished.
Thank you.
I would like to remark that we have a grandson of the man who probably made the first feathers and wedges to break out stone here in our town, just a little sort of.
Yeah, nowadays, you ever put a skirt on a stone post? What they call a skirt, chop it down, taper it up, put a cap on top of it. Yeah, cemetery had something like that.
Wayne, hey Wayne.
I'll make it just, don't inhale.
You're all right. Just feel free to move around.
There's food here for everybody.
I know, we're supposed to be in Audrey 15, 20 minutes ago.